Welcome to Of Knights and Pilgrims, a podcast about Edmund Spenser's The Faerie Queene. I am Christian Leithart.
And I'm David Grubbs.
In this episode, we'll be covering Book 1, Canto 3.
Huzzah.
We highly recommend that you listen to The Faerie Queene. I know we've mentioned before Thomas Copeland's public domain recording available on LibriVox and YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
It's in some ways easier to understand the audio version than to have to wade through all the spellings in Spenser's archaic language. Or, as David's pointed out multiple times, not archaic, but just normal for his time period.
But archaic for us.
Right. Okay, we should dive into Canto 3. David, do you want to give a quick summary of what's happened so far?
Well, so far, the Red Cross Knight, St. George, has been distracted from his quest. He's supposed to be going to kill a dragon to liberate Una, the One Truth, or the One True Church's parents, but he got distracted. First by getting lost in the woods and fighting the monster called Error, the very obvious monster called Error, after which he proceeds to get deceived left and right. First by Archimago, the wizard in the woods pretending to be a hermit, who tempts him into distrusting Una. He is deceived into breaking faith with her. And then is again deceived by Duessa, presenting herself as Fidessa, the what would you call it? The two-faced one? The duplicitous one.
Oh, Duessa. Yes.
Yeah, the duplicitous one presenting herself as Fidessa, the faithful one.
Right. If you think of the Essa names as like the essence, the thing of that. So the Fidessa, the faithful one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Fidessa, Duessa secretly, has worked her wicked wiles on him, and even though a talking tree tried to clue him in on his peril, Red Cross Knight seems pretty set in his bad way, and so we've left that pair and have returned to deserted Una.
Right. So we switch points of view back to Una. We've been with Red Cross and Duessa for a bit, and we're back to Una, who's woken up to find her champion gone and goes to seek him. She meets several different characters in this canto, and she's fairly passive. She's seeking Red Cross, or she's seeking the knight, but other than that, she is really just sort of rescued by various characters, interacts with them, talks to them. And it's almost, if you think of Una as like truth, then it's just sort of different ways of allegorically describing truth and how other things interact with that. I did think it was interesting right at the beginning of Canto 3, you get into the poet's perspective, and he's like talking about how beautiful she is and how woeful it is that such a beautiful one is wandering all alone and not loved by her knight. Do you think there's any like more sophisticated reason for this other than he's just being a poet?
Right.
Just being, all emotional about it and trying to like play on the pathetic scene that we have in front of us. Is he doing anything more sophisticated than that?
Well, part of fashioning the virtue, fashioning a gentleman in virtue, which, is the stated purpose we talked about a few episodes ago. Part of doing that is retuning the passions, retuning the feelings in virtuous ways. And so in the last canto, in Canto 2, Duessa plays on Red Cross Knight's pity and sympathy, presenting herself as this hard done by maiden who's been left in the lurch and taken advantage of. She's the true damsel in distress. So Red Cross Knight has been lured away from the one that he should be faithful to. And now at the beginning of 3, our narrator is reminding us of where our sympathies ought to lie. Our sympathies ought to lie with our true allegiances. We shouldn't be so fickle as to be drawn away from that true allegiance and then have our emotions played on with those who have no no right to that.
That makes a lot of sense to me, especially considering in the fourth stanza, she takes off her wimple basically and reveals her face and her. It doesn't say her hair, but she does take her stole and her fillet off. So she kind of uncovers her. She has her true nature revealed, and all the characters in this canto that interact with her all respond in some way to her appearance. Just we talked about how appearances and the way things seem is kind of been a big theme, almost to the point where that growing in virtue, like you said, is the ability to see things for what they truly are. There's a lot of disguises and just pretend. Archimago is kind of the master of disguise here, but for Una, when she becomes undisguised, she provokes reactions in people, and so maybe that's kind of what the poet's doing. He's trying to provoke a reaction in the reader when we're looking at Una.
Truth really is beautiful.
Yeah.
As opposed to those things which are mere appearances, are using beauty as a disguise.
Yeah. I've always liked this part in stanza 4 where it says her angel's face as the great eye of heaven shined bright and made sunshine in the shady place. For some reason, that line sticks in my mind. It might have been the title of a paper I read one time, but that's always stuck out to me.
Yeah, she doesn't borrow light from anything else. She possesses light.
Yeah. And as we'll see in the next canto, there's a parallel, or I guess a contrast there, with another female character who tries to shine light out from herself. We meet the first character that has a response to Una's beauty is the lion, who bounds up out of the thickest wood. Is one of the best characters, and also one of the most commonly portrayed parts of the Faerie Queene.
It's just a great image.
Una and the lion together, beautiful maiden in white, and this great strong lion. I mean, it's on coins. It's in painting after painting. You would think there are so many other good, like Error's Den. Why isn't that painted? But for some reason,
with the exploding toad babies.
But for some reason, this is the one that's always like if you look up Faerie Queene painting, you'll either see Britomart or you'll see Una and the lion. I had always read that the lion allegorically represented natural law, and I think I got that from the annotations in the Fierce Wars and Faithful Loves that we've mentioned before. When I was looking for the notes for the Penguin Classics edition, apparently there's a big debate about what he represents. What allegorical figure is the lion supposed to be? To me, the natural law interpretation makes the most sense. Did you have like a different reading of it?
I sort of took it as nature more generally.
Yeah.
Which can include both the wild and untamed natural world and the order that would be represented in that, but also the more natural, or what we might call instinctive or beastly side of the human. There are later cantos we will see other nature aligned or savage aligned creatures and people respecting Una in the same way that the lion does.
Yeah.
So that the lion's obeisance, the lion's homage and submission and obedience and protection of Una is representative of nature's way of recognizing what is true in a kind of in a way that the fall doesn't necessarily affect.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like if you're the truly natural is going to respond positively to truth. Because the people that react negatively, like specifically the Sands brother that shows up in this chapter, is the opposite of the lion. And he's almost more bestial in a sort of destructive way than the lion is. And I can think of at least one other place where an animal is contrasted with a human character, and the animal's seen as more humane in a sense than the human character is. But yeah, the idea of nature responding to the beauty of truth, like undiluted nature. He's an animal. So, but I mean, he kind of turns into her little dog, her little, not a little dog, a big dog, a protector. He licks her feet, her hands, and he just sort of like, I mean, just walks alongside her everywhere she goes. And at one point, she, from a character perspective, I'm not sure why Una has all this affection for Red Cross. But she sees the lion,
Yeah.
and it kind of reminds her again, everything, Red Cross is gone. Everything reminds her of him. And she calls him my lion. She wishes that her lion were around, but she'll make do with this one while he's not there.
Which is cute.
Yeah. And then in stanza 9, it says, the lion would not leave her desolate, but with her went along as a strong guard of her chaste person and a faithful mate of her sad troubles and misfortunes hard. Still while she slept, he kept both watch and ward, and when she waked, he waited diligent, with humble service to her will prepared. And we have this knightly allegiance to Una that Red Cross has failed to provide, almost from the first test.
I don't think natural law is far off from this. I mean, I think a more general nature reading works too, but he is showing that fealty to the truth, that which is truly beautiful ought to be loved, that which is worthy but weak or vulnerable ought to be defended, that which is true ought to be obeyed, and that the laws of chivalry, which Red Cross Knight has strayed from at this moment, as he strayed from her, that those laws are not artificial courtly things. They are simply
how it ought to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simply how it ought to be.
Yeah.
And the lion recognizes it too.
Right. And I think it's the kind of thing you can really only get away with in an allegory. I don't think it quite works in real life that you would say that you could say, like, theologically, the way, like, nature can, I guess this is a whole debate about natural law. Does uncontrolled nature recognize truth in itself? It almost is like a dead end discussion, because if you're just talking about, like, animals, does an animal grasp truth? If they were faced with truth, how would the animal behave? It's hard to imagine that. But certainly, like, what we see in the book is that men make a conscious decision to turn away from Una or to abuse her in some way, because men are sinful and the lion's not. We immediately come to another character, kind of a trio. And this character is first described, she's wandering, she's carrying a pot of water, and she doesn't speak or hear. She can see, right? It's her mother who can't see.
Yeah.
So she can't speak or hear. She's carrying a pot of water. There's got to be a reference here to the Gospels. They shall not see or understand. I mean, they just have some blind character's truth that can be recognized by the natural world, goes into what are apparently very religious people and is unrecognized by them, actually rejected by them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's John 1.
Yeah, exactly.
He came to his own, but his own did not receive him. And the parables of Christ, talking about the landowner or the king who sends his son to be the messenger, who is then, or sends messengers and then eventually sends his son as messenger, and all his messengers are mistreated. I mean, there's something like that going on here. So Spenser's sourcing his parable here more biblically, but because it's taken an explicitly religious turn, the things about truth and beauty and nature and justice, which the lion represents, those are the sorts of things that a Plato might not along with.
Yeah.
All right, but once
then
we get
veer
to
into rosaries and paternosters and
and
these two characters. Well, I did find an interesting note about the fact that she's carrying a pot of water.
Yeah,
there's definitely probably a woman at the well reference, because she's carrying water either to or, well, I guess from a well probably. She sees Una and throws the water down on the ground. So if there's some symbolism there of water, like living water or something like that, she gets rid of it the minute she sees Una, runs away, not screaming because she can't talk, but terrified, shaking. She and her mother live together, and her mother is blind. So we have this deaf, dumb, and blind pair of characters. The names are Abessa as the daughter, which I guess we're going as Essa as like the essence. She is Ab essence. She is nothing. But there's also a pun on Abbess, I'm sure, the name Abbess. And then her mother's name basically means blind heart, but we were having some debate about how to say it. Korkeka in, I guess, if you're doing hard C's.
Yeah.
What was it? Corsica?
Um,
We were going off
yeah,
of
Thomas Copeland
Copeland's
says Corkecha, something like that.
Corkecha, that's right.
Pronouncing it, is that how would you would say it if it was Italian? I don't know. In my head, I've always said Corsica, like Corsica,
Like the islands, yeah.
like the island. But yeah, this is another one of Spenser's cobbled together, probably on the fly names that's meant to have a kind of obvious and transparent etymology that leads the one who understands the classical languages straight to the significance of the character.
Also, not just calling her blind heart, like Bunyan might do. There's a little bit more of a removal. So not calling Una truth, but calling her truth, or not calling her faith, but calling her Una rather than calling her truth or faith. It just gives you a little bit more of a character there, rather than we don't have to call Red Cross Holiness all the time. We can just call
Right.
him Red Cross or George, I suppose.
Yeah.
Which is
Well,
even better.
There's the argument, the short quatrain that's at the beginning of the canto that calls her blind devotion.
Mm-hmm.
So you have starting off, forsaken truth. So there, Una is called truth. So you know what she signifies, even though it's going to call her Una. Long seeks her love and makes the lion mild. We saw that. Mars blind devotions mart or market.
Yes, I did have to look that one up. Yeah.
Yeah. And falls in hand of lecher of bile.
So I thought that third line, Mars blind devotions mart, was really odd. In the story, in the canto, there's a sort of business going on here that probably wouldn't have occurred to me without that word. So Abessa and Corsica, let's go with that. Abessa and Corsica, apparently they spend all their time praying and clicking their beads and stuff. But they have this guy who comes by with he's a robber. He robs churches and steals things, specifically Catholic churches. He's stealing from priests. His name's Kirkrapine, the
church robber.
The church robber. And he comes in and he shares his wealth with them. So there actually is this sort of business that they have where the ladies seem so pious and helpless, but then they've got this sort of deal with this robber. So there is a sort of market there, some kind of traffic or business going on between the robber and the superstitious worshiper. Spenser, clearly, there's no love lost with the Catholics for him. But here, it was significant, I think, that Kirkrapine is robbing the Catholic churches. It's not the Catholics are robbing everyone else, but they are using their cover. Like, you have all the piety, the apparent piety is being used to steal valuable things from the Catholic churches themselves, which, it was slightly more sophisticated than sometimes you might think.
Spenser is not yet the Puritan putting a brick through a stained glass window. It's not yet the iconoclastic urge that you see, I guess, in the next generation after Spenser, the next century. The churches of the Church of England in Elizabeth's rule are still elaborate and beautiful places. There are still elaborate vestments. The beauty that was in those churches is still there, but the monasteries were dissolved. I know that there are theological points that Spenser makes against the Roman Catholic Church as we go through the Faerie Queene, but I think what's coming into focus in this particular episode is less of a theological point and more of a historical point about corruption that you would find agreement with from a Francis of Assisi or Geoffrey Chaucer. This idea that the church at different times, in their acquisition of beautiful things in order to make the places of worship beautiful, were also acquiring valuable things, so that those who were on paper by vow supposed to be poor. In this case, we have this woman who sits unseeing in the dark, keeping herself occupied with a litany of prayers. She is described as doing a painful penance, sitting in ashes and sackcloth, and yet she's constantly being brought all of this wealth to enrich her.
Yeah, it's sort of like, I mean, even today when pastors don't make vows of poverty, there's something about a pastor with a super expensive sports car or a private jet
Yes.
that you're kind of like, that's just, there's something not quite fitting about that, you know?
A watch that's worth more than,
Right. Then the
my
weekly
salary.
offering, yeah.
I think that's something that's going. I think that's what's going on here. So that the Kirk rapine, it's not so much someone outside the church robbing the churches, so much as the wealth, the beauty that the churches collected as part of making the place of worship grand and glorious. The beautiful things are also valuable things, so that Kirk rapine it's a critique of those within the church who would misuse that gathering of wealth as if it was their own. Like Eli's sons choosing the best cuts of meat to eat for themselves at the tabernacle. Or the lion spoils blind devotion's mart. It's Jesus with a whip driving out money changers.
Right. Yeah. What happens to Kirk rapine?
Oh yeah, he gets lioned.
Yes. Yes, it's great.
The lion happens
It's a
to
great
him.
moment of like, I mean, it's a lion. He's not. There's no joust. There's no slapping him in the face with a glove. It's just Kirk rapine comes to Abessa and Corsica's house and tries to get in. The door's locked. The lion, and so he breaks the door down. The lion leaps out, tears him into 1,000 pieces. He is quite dismembered.
Quite dismembered hath.
And his blood goes into the ground, and that's the end of Kirk rapine.
Yeah. So one of the things that I love about Spenser's art is, on one hand, he has these extended symbols and allegories that work over the course of an entire episode. But then there are also these flashes of symbol that are there for just a few lines. A few things fall into relative position in one shot, as it were.
Yeah.
And you suddenly see a picture that then dissolves and moves on as the pieces and the characters move. Just as we saw the woman at the well in that brief moment where this woman is carrying a water pitcher, and then the scene breaks when she drops the water pitcher. So we see something here too in that the stanza where the lion attacks Kirk rapine. It says this is the end of stanza 19. Seizing cruel claws on trembling breast, under his lordly foot him proudly hath suppressed. So in this brief moment, the lion's not nature anymore. It's Jesus crushing the serpent under his foot.
Yeah.
It's a lordly foot that has proudly suppressed the evil.
Right.
That's cool.
It is something that would be really difficult to do in any other medium.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen like animated films that try to do stuff like this and go like cutting back and forth between different images to try to get across that idea that this is multiple things happening at the same time, and it just ends up being very confusing.
Yeah.
But just by the simple addition of a word, it brings in this host of associations. It's really cool. They've killed Kirk rapine. They spent the night in the house. They're leaving the next morning. Before we go on, Odysseus is mentioned twice in this canto. He's mentioned in stanza 21, that long wandering Greek, that for his love refused a deity. And then there's another time. It's not, so it's not Odysseus explicitly, but in stanza 31, it says the beaten mariner that long hath wandered in the ocean wide. and it uses these Greek names. Is it just Odysseus is the most famous wanderer, so as Una is wandering around, he's the most natural comparison to her, or is there something? Is there a deeper level to the comparison of Una and Odysseus?
Well, stanza 21 that you just pointed out, she's wandering on their former journey forward pass in ways unknown, her wandering night to seek, with pains far passing that long wandering Greek, that for his love refused deity. So, like, that's the sense in which it's not just that she's wandering around, it's that the reason why she's wandering is that she refused, like Odysseus, to be diverted from the one who is the rightful object of her faithfulness.
Yeah. There's this great moment in the Odyssey where there's an epic simile about a mariner who sees his homeland for the first time. And it's actually comparing Penelope when she sees Odysseus. When he finally reveals himself, she sees him. She's compared to the mariner finally coming home from the wanderings. And I think there's something similar here where the lady is searching for her knight like a wanderer is searching for his home. So like it says, her pains passed that long wandering Greek, Odysseus. She had more pains than he did. Yeah, I think it's probably intentional. He's doing something intentional there with her love passes the love of Odysseus, or the love of Penelope too, for Odysseus. So they, the lion and Una go on their merry way. The ladies come out and find Kirkripine dead and just start chasing after them. Corsica's yelling. Abessa's not doing anything. I guess maybe she's leading her mother.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Corsica's yelling curses and stuff at her, but then gives up and turns around and goes back because they're not doing anything. So empty words. And then they meet our old friend Archimago.
Yeah.
Who's in disguise as Red Cross.
Yes.
Yeah. Is he actually wearing his armor? No, he's not. He's just in disguise.
It's an imitation of George's armor.
Right.
It looks like his armor, but none of it works.
Right. Right. Archimago's afraid of the lion.
Yes.
So he stays far away until Una sees him and calls him, and then they join up together. And his excuse for leaving her, he excuses Red Cross leaving by saying, "Oh, I had to go. There was a felon strong. I had to go fight him. But now I'm back. I took care of that."
Yeah.
And here's where we have the simile of she's the mariner who is finding her home at last.
I find his speech to her is so funny to me. And the reason I left was to have an adventure in somewhere else.
Yeah.
It has this guy who's just making things up as he goes along kind of feel to it. And then good cause of mine excuse, that mote you well please well to accept. And this is a good excuse, and you should totally accept it. And
now I'm back.
Yay. And she
accepts it.
And she does.
Yeah.
One loving hour for many years of sorrow can dispense.
A dram of sweet is worth a pound of sour.
Yeah.
There's the commonplace for you, the quote. And it says in the stanza 30, true love hath no power to look in back, his eyes be fixed before. So you might call it being naive. Again, if we were just talking about humans and not allegorical figures, that if something about faith is willing to forgive, and yet she doesn't see through the disguise, so it's not really him. I don't know.
This is one of the places where you're just like, you know what? This isn't systematic theology.
Yeah.
Let's not push it too far. On the other hand, we do have a strong contrast with Red Cross Knight, who, when he was deceived, he begins to act against his faith, against his duty. She is deceived, but the way that she's deceived is she continues her duty, but misdirecting it. So even when deceived, she's not actually violating conscience.
The next, we finally meet the third encounter with another Sans brother, Sans Loy. And there's a pretty clear contrast between the lion, who sees Una's beauty, is immediately transformed into her loyal servant, and this Saracen knight who is named without loyalty. I have no loyalty. He also has an immediate response to her beauty, but it's to carry her off, to ravish her. So we have, there's just a clear contrast. I wonder if there's some kind of chiastic structure in this book with Sansloy and the lion, Archimago and the Kirkerpine. I didn't take the time to try to figure it out.
Yeah,
but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, chart and a whiteboard for that one.
Yeah. Predictably, Archimago is no champion at all. He's faint through fear to taste the untried dent of deadly steel. And yet, Una's words cheer him so much he thinks, maybe I can do this. And
I thought that was so interesting. He knows he's a trickster. He knows he stands absolutely no chance, that his spear is fake. It's all fake. But it's almost this weird kind of testimony to the power of truth.
Yeah.
Like for a moment, he kind of feels sort of kind of like he might sort of kind of be George.
Yeah, right, yeah. It reminds me of like if Danny Kaye were playing this character, like in the Court Jester. Maybe I am a hero. And you're like,
yeah.
No, you're not.
I mean, he's not, but it's another one of those moments where you get to see that it is possible for someone who is not rightfully truths to nonetheless have a moment of disposition towards truth that is right. Truth is still powerful.
Right.
Someone who is and has not been living in accordance with truth might nonetheless in a moment be drawn to truth to do a thing that they wouldn't otherwise do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is amusing for sure. It's also interesting. Sansloy, whose name means without loyalty, is out to get revenge for his brother. But it's almost the sort of these people are loyal. The brothers, you imagine they get together at family reunions and things are terrible. I don't think they're on good terms with each other. But when they're out of each other's
actually
sight,
do see them together.
No, which is interesting. But he feels like avenging his brother. But I don't think that's out of any sense of loyalty. His character almost seems more driven by rage than anything else.
Well, I think it's loyalty, but also law. So lawlessness, and maybe that's where the rage later in the next canto, he will be called out for having surpassed the bounds in his anger. He will be kind of pulled back into the lawful bounds.
Yeah.
I mean, in the same way that sans foi, without faith, is without faith in terms of, I mean, he represents a kind of religious lack of faith or failure to recognize the true faith, but also faithfulness, unreliableness, and later on sans joy, without joy, but also joy meaning the completion or the achievement of something.
Yeah, that's true.
Spenser gets to he likes to create these names that indicate significances, but really often they have more than one.
Which I think is part of that's part of the great, like the advantages of choosing a name that's a little bit removed. There's another language, or he's mixing languages, so he's able to do those multiple meanings. Like sans loy, well, that's the beginning of the word loyalty, so maybe there's some loyalty there. But it's also connected to the word law, so you can talk about that too. Or abessa looks like the word abyss, but also means without basically any character at all. She is nothing.
Well, and sans, without in French, and son, saint, in Spanish. Like as the opposites of Saint George, they are not son, they are sans.
And they're clearly the Spanish, because they're Saracens. There would be just because of the Moorish influence in Spain. There's clearly the idea of it being connected to Spanish is not at all far-fetched. So Archimago is unseated. Sansloy goes to kill him despite Una's protests, pulls off his helmet, and then recognizes him. And I love how all of these bad guys know each other. They're like, oh, it's you, Archimago. How you been, old buddy? I just find that and it happens again later with someone else. I think it's that Duessa is known in the court of pride. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Everyone's like, oh, what's up, Duessa? She's like, shh, I'm Fidessa right now. I just think it's
the League of Supervillains in the Spenser world.
Right. Unfortunately, so sadly, we have to say goodbye to the lion already. You have the lion, natural law versus sort of rage without loyalty, without law. And unfortunately, Sansloy wins this one and carries Una off.
Because nature is not sufficient to restrain passions when they are lawless.
And at the very end, stanza 44, this is where I was thinking that second animal. I think it's her horse. Her servile beast yet would not leave her so, but follows her far off, nor aught he fears to be partaker of her wandering woe, more mild and beastly kind than that her beastly foe. So Sansloy is more of a beast than her own horse is. I assume this is a horse because the lion dies on the previous page.
I mean, the lamb's probably out there still somewhere.
Yeah.
But it had her horse had previously been mentioned. So
yeah, I think it is the horse that's following her.
Yeah.
But we do get the parallel of the animals again. Well, Canto 3 is not the most complicated one. I feel like the Abessa Kirk-Rapine episode is pretty straightforward. Is there anything else we wanted to say about this one? There will be other cantos like this, I think, where it's like, well, that's what happened. Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty
straightforward. Let us know if you have any questions.
I do think it's kind of funny. You mentioned earlier on the degree to which the elements of this canto show up in artistic representations of Faerie Queene. That the way that image of Una and the lion sticks around, even though that lion is around for one canto.
Right. Totally. Yeah. But it just stuck in people's mind.
Yeah.
I wonder who the paintings that I can think of are fairly late. Like
Victorians?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And there was coins minted with Una and the lion on them, probably from around the same era. I don't know what prompted the revival of Una and the lion, but that'd be interesting to look into. Well, I think we might be done for that episode. We'll see you guys next time.